So originally this staircase was covered in a 90s carpet, which is outdated and super ugly. So I'm beyond stoked that it's gone. And as we're renovating the attic at the top of the stairs, we've added a bunch of white oak flooring and a couple of other white oak features. So it only seems fitting that we continue that white oak trend coming down the staircase. So my plan with the staircase is to retrofit some new stair treads and risers, but in a unique way. So you see here is a diagram of the staircase in its original state. You got the riser, you got the tread, and you got the nose-in. And this is what I'm going to be adding on top out of some white oak. And you'll notice two things. One, I eliminate the nose-in, but because the riser is on an 8-degree angle, it kind of serves the same purpose and it still gives you the extra length on the tread. So I think it's going to look pretty damn cool. But because I'm not putting in regular stair treads and risers, I have to build my own. To which I got this stack of 1-inch thick white oak. And due to the nature of the wood and the fact that it's so thin, it's not the straightest. So to make it easier on myself and to get the most out of my material when I come to mill it up, I'm gonna break it down into 3-foot sections on my table saw, which is just wider than the staircase itself. And now that I got a bunch of these at 3 feet in length, I can head on over to the boneyard and get them all nice and flat on my jointer and at equal thicknesses on my planer. Okay, cool, so I got a bunch of material mostly milled up, still a little bit too thick, but that's exactly what I need at this stage. And you'll notice that they're not quite wide enough to become a tread or a riser, and that's because I gotta glue them together. So now that I got my treads and my risers all ready to go, I can now start figuring out how wide to cut them. So it's unlikely that my staircase and your staircase again have the exact same measurements on the treads and risers. So it's pointless me giving any measurements out because it's not going to really help anyone. All I can say is that an 8-degree angle on the riser works best for this kind of staircase, and I base my measurements around that. So to help me get my measurements, I made a very simple template out of the same size thickness material as my stair treads. So now I can go ahead and adjust and tweak this accordingly till I'm happy how it sits, and then I can test it out on all of the steps going up to make sure there's no weird ones that are just kind of sticking out. So now that I have my measurements for the stair treads and my risers, I'm a little bit more confident cutting into this pack of really expensive lumber, but I'm only going to cut a handful at a time so that I can catch any kind of discrepancies on the way. So now with that said, I can start cutting the angles and the width on a few of these stair treads on my table saw. So in order to accurately cut my treads and risers from wall to wall, I come up with this real simple jig that I designed and made on my CNC. Now this is really easy to replicate, and all I really have to do is extend the wings wall to wall and transfer that measurement to my material. And now with my length marked out, I can go ahead and take it over to the miter saw and get it cut. Okay, cool, so now that I got a few cut and dry fitted, I'm pretty happy how it's looking and I'm way more confident in my measurements. Bearing in mind, if you're slightly off at the bottom, things will just get worse and worse as it gets up. So that's why I kind of like to take my time and get things right at the start. I also added some dominoes in between the treads and the risers to kind of help with alignment when I come to glue things up later on. So now that I'm pretty confident on what I got going on here, I can now just crack on and get the rest done. So now that all the treads and risers are in, I am pretty happy to be at this stage of the build. And I've got to admit, I was skeptical about the design at first, and I know there's still a lot of work to be done, but I can see the light at the end of the tunnel and it's looking way better than I expected. So I'm happy about that. So now that all the treads and risers are in, next, I'm going to take them all back out again and give everything a really, really good sand. I also went ahead and drilled some countersunk holes at the back of each of the treads. So that way I can screw the backs of the treads down when I come to install it, and the riser is going to cover up those screw heads. And obviously I can't really seal the underside once the whole thing is installed, so I have to seal it beforehand. But before I seal it, I got to tape off any areas that the riser and the treads meet, so that way I can glue them together. So as I don't have access to the underside of the staircase, other than the screws at the back of each tread, I'm going to be heavily reliant on glue and adhesive to kind of hold everything together. To which I got this subfloor and deck adhesive, which is designed for this kind of thing. And once cured, it's going to be plenty strong enough to bond the stair treads and risers to the staircase. And it's also going to eliminate any squeaks, because there's nothing worse than a squeaky staircase. And obviously I'll be using wood glue in between each point the tread and the risers meet. But as the staircase is a bit of a unique shape, you can't really clamp it, to which I got this filament tape. It's strong, it doesn't really tear, and it's great for pulling pieces together and keeping it nice and tight. So at this stage of the project, it's important that I clean up any of the glue residue before it dries, and that's going to save me a whole bunch of time when I come to sand. I also want to mention something that I forgot to mention earlier, and that's when cutting the stair treads and risers wall to wall, I want to make sure to leave at least a 1/16 of an inch gap from between the wood and the drywall, and that's going to allow for any kind of movement and minimize the noise. So now I can give everything a really good sand in preparation for applying the finish. And then speaking of the finish, today I'm going to be using this Bona Traffic HD, which is the industry standard for floor finishing. It's very easy to apply and it's very durable, which is great for me because I live with a bunch of creatures that really don't respect wood. Now before I apply this, you have to apply the sealer, which is sold separately. And the sealer comes with a few different kind of finishes, whether you want darker or natural or lighter. I went with the most natural looking one, and I applied this by brushing in the edges and then rolled where I can. As it's self-leveling, it kind of levels itself out and it looks real nice. And then once a single coat of sealer has dried, and then apply 2 coats of the finish the exact same way, allowing the appropriate dry time in between. So now that's all I have to do is to caulk the edges and then touch up any of the scuffs, and this project is complete. And I gotta say, I am so stoked how this whole thing come together, especially compared to the old 90s gross carpet staircase. It's modern, it's way cleaner looking, it's silent and it's strong feeling. It also ties this whole renovation and the room together